He is a research fellow, a senior fellow, pardon me, at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. You might see him testifying before Congress on issues of Islam, the war on terror, war on Islamofascism, understanding the terrorist enemy domestically, internationally. He's a good friend of the show. Known him a long time. David Gartenstein-Ross, welcome back. How are you, my friend?
Crane, I'm doing great, and it's always a pleasure to join you.
Hey, tell me this. Boko Haram, now the hashtag activism that has been mocked, the back and forth there, I found it to be a bit silly and light, but indicative of what we've seen out of this administration. It's an example of how they deal with terrorism and the issue of national security and not connecting the dots. That all said, I would love your opinion. What has been unfair criticism of Boko Haram and our response as a country, as a nation, to Boko Haram's taking of 300 schoolgirls in Nigeria?
The main area where I think criticism has been unfair is that fashioning a response to a hostage taking in Africa, where our strategic interests are there, but on the low end of the spectrum, is a difficult thing. We are in fact doing things. You had military advisors go over. The U.S. has, according to open source reporting, been giving aerial surveillance to the Nigerian government, which is something that will help them in trying to track down the girls. But it's also a situation in which the local actor is, to put it mildly, suboptimal. The Nigerian military has committed copious human rights abuses. It's not well armed. It's not well trained. And so a hostage rescue situation is going to be very difficult for it to perform even under the best of circumstances. I think that some policy inertia here is going to be inevitable, but at the same time, I think that the U.S. has taken steps. And personally, I think one of our problems over the past 13 years has been we'll often have a ready, fire, aim approach. That is, we take action. We're not thinking how it fits into the broader strategic context. And I don't mind seeing an administration that is trying to at least get some strategic appreciation of the issue before acting.
But with that strategic appreciation in that time, I would be much more confident in the fact of the understanding of what we're dealing with Boko Haram. Do you think what I mean by that is I believe this is a part of a greater problem, and it's an opportunity to show once again what we believe and what they believe, what the terrorists believe and what people who desire to be free believe, and to give those two very clear, much in the age of communism, which Reagan did. Your thoughts?
Well, okay, so first of all, we started this off with you asking me to be in an oppositional position, right? You asked, what is it that I think has been unfair criticism?
Yes, absolutely. I wasn't debating.
I think all criticism is unfair.
Okay.
We've had this back and forth before about your specifics of how the administration and Obama doesn't do enough to say this is what we believe, this is what they believe. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I don't think that's the administration's problem. Let me pinpoint, Crane, what I think the administration's problem is, as opposed to just saying that I don't agree with that line of criticism. I think there's a very real line of criticism for this administration. I will say that I believe this administration politicizes intelligence with respect to al-Qaeda far, far worse than the Bush administration politicized any kind of intelligence. I think that it's shameful what I am seeing within analytic circles. And I will say that I think that the area where I think they fail to connect the dots is not with respect to values, but with respect to al-Qaeda. If you look back to the beginning of the Arab Spring, you've had one set of failed assessments after another coming out of the administration. First, there was the notion that the Arab Spring was going to be devastating to our foes, which it hasn't been in any way, shape, or form. Our enemies have prospered from those revolutions. That's not to say we should have stood against them, but we misunderstood what was happening. Secondly, you had another set of assessments around the time that Osama bin Laden was killed, which was that al-Qaeda was on the verge of strategic defeat. Leon Panetta said that directly. That was coming out of analytic circles. It was quoted widely in the media. It has not turned out that way. If you look at the strength of al-Qaeda at the start of 2014, it controlled more territory than it ever had. They got those assessments wrong. You had other incorrect assessments. And at this point in time, there's another analytic line being heavily pushed within the administration, which is that al-Qaeda's senior leadership has lost control of al-Qaeda, the network. Now, the way Boko Haram fits in is that it is not an official al-Qaeda affiliate. It certainly is in line with their ideology, and it has operational connections. And the area where the administration fails to connect the dots and refuses to connect the dots is the strength of al-Qaeda specifically. It's basically been accounting every way, shape, and form to try to preserve the idea, which it's been pushing for several years, that al-Qaeda is defeated. And so it shifted it from all the various iterations of al-Qaeda to al-Qaeda senior leadership. It's never decided what al-Qaeda senior leadership is. It tends to downplay connections between al-Qaeda and various things that are occurring, various groups that are out there. That's what I think the problem is. I don't think the problem is that they aren't willing to state our values. I think it's that there's an assessment being pushed, which is an incorrect assessment.
What do we do about those incorrect assessments other than pointing them out like you just did brilliantly?
Well, I think we need to point them out, but it's a real problem, both in the public sphere and also in the governmental sphere. I don't think that analytic success is linked to analysts being right. Simply because I'm kind of a nice guy and don't like.
You're a very nice guy.
I will say that analysts who have been consistently wrong about these issues have their careers have absolutely blossomed. Whereas being right about those issues doesn't necessarily carry any sort of benefit to it. Oh, another area where this administration has been wrong in its assessment is political Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood. Right? There was this notion back in 2011 that the spreading of political Islam would actually undermine al-Qaeda and would undermine other jihadist groups by providing an alternative that is political Islamists who would work within the system as opposed to working outside of the system. That's another area of incorrect assessments. And at the end of the day, the problem is that generally the success of analysts in their careers is not based upon being right. It's based upon patronage networks. It's based upon people who will help their career to blossom, even if their analytic lines are wrong. So there's very little incentive for people to actually get things right. It's an enormous structural problem. Absolutely. The administration should be called out when it's wrong. Any administration should be called out when it's wrong. And analysts who are wrong on issues, it's worth dredging the record up again and again, particularly when the same line of argument tends to reemerge constantly. And we've seen a repackaging of various ways in which al-Qaeda is supposedly defeated for years. And as each one is proven wrong, people don't have the historical memory to understand that the next iteration that comes up is really a play on the same argument.
And giving us that historical perspective and recognizing the failure, you say that this has existed. We're talking, this crosses Clinton, Bush, Obama. It's not a question of the presidency per se of who's the occupant. Is it a question? It's a question of how people are awarded or rewarded and assessed, in essence, their assessment of advancement. That's the problem.
Oh, in terms of the incentive structure, yes.
Yes.
In terms of the incentive structure, that's something that crosses administrations. In terms of what they've gotten wrong, the assessments what they've gotten wrong has been somewhat different from one administration to the other. And as I said, I think the politicization of intelligence is worse now than I've ever seen it. And I know a number of old hands within the intelligence community who absolutely agree with me. I think there is an enormous problem with the politicization of intelligence. Frankly, I'm extraordinarily concerned about what's happening to the intelligence community.
David, recognizing that we have an announcement to make that this will be your last time on the program as our regular scheduled guest, I just have one quick follow-up. If there was one thing you would do to change it, other than exposing it, what would you do?
I would look. The thing that I would like to see done, but this is difficult, is to change the incentive structure for analysts so there is a reward for getting things right, and not just for following the career line that is safe. The problem is that you get into a whole host of issues there, but that's a direction that I think is worth exploring. But without getting into the specific logistics, there are a number of difficulties with pursuing that specific line, but I think it's a line that's worth pursuing nonetheless.
All I have to say is please don't go. I'm kidding, of course. I know you have to. David, we have a minute remaining. You have news, which is wonderful, but at the same time, it's bittersweet. Go ahead. For us.
Well,
go.
There's part of the news that I told you on the phone is yes. Confidential for the moment.
Okay, yes. Pardon.
But what I will say is,
so
as your listeners know, yes. I have a baby girl at home.
Yes.
And for me right now, I'm trying to you're on American Family Radio Network, and yes. I'm trying to prioritize my family in a deeper way. And unfortunately, your show falls right in smack in the middle of dinner time / my daughter's bedtime, and so having this every week is just a little bit too much. But I wanted to thank you and thank your audience. I'm sure you and I will be talking again occasionally,
yes.
Although not as frequently as we have been. I'm very
yes.
appreciative of the long relationship, Crane, that you and I have had. I'm
yes.
very appreciative of your listeners, and I'm sure that both you and they can understand the deep need to make sure that I'm fulfilling my family obligations above all else.
Amen. And that's what the focus is, and it's great that you're doing that. You're spending the time with the family, and you're making that decision. And it's at times it's a tough one to make when it's the career and you're sitting there, not even the career point, the enjoyment of discussion and all of that. And God bless you for it, man. I love you. Thank you for everything. And we're going to put a little link up to David's work, and you can comment and say, great job, David, focusing in on what should be focused in on, and that's family. Great job, David.